Well, I want to welcome everyone to the August 2022 Cvta Finance Committee meeting. Good morning, everyone. I trust everyone is well on another hot, steamy day in the summer here in the Richmond region. Ms. Firestone, would you please certify whether or not we have a quorum?
Yes, sir. Hold on one second. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton. New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Present, and I want to apologize for being late. I had not received notice of this meeting.
And we have City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. We'll move on to item one on the agenda today. It's a consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. I do believe we do have a change to the agenda. Mr. Carroll?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just make a motion that we make an amendment to the agenda under other business. We could stick it in just before item 10 for a closed session to discuss a personnel matter.
Are all in favor of the amended agenda vote? All say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No opposition, the motion passed. Let's move on to item two, the approval of the July 13th, 2022 meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the July 13th, 2022 minutes?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion approved, it's been seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. The minutes are approved. We'll move on to item three, the open public comment period. Is there anyone from the public who signed up for a public comment today, whether virtually or in person?
No, sir.
There's no open comments. We'll move on to item four, the election of the FY23 chair and vice chair. First, are there any nominations for chair of the Finance Committee?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Mr. Canova Peterson to be chair of the Finance Committee.
There's a motion to nominate Mr. Canova Peterson from Hanover County as the chair of the Finance Committee. I'd like to second that nomination.
A second.
It's been seconded. Is all in favor of Mr. Peterson being the chair of the Finance Committee meeting?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
One point of order.
Yes. You want to say something about Mr. Peterson?
Well, always. Wonderful things. But I want to make sure that the motion is properly seconded and not deference to Ms. Page, but she's not actually on the Finance Committee yet. So I don't think that she can actually make a second.
Although I seconded.
So you've seconded,
Yeah,
that we're good. And shortly she'll be able to participate in that process. And again, I do think it's a nice transition to go from our vice chair to our chair position. And last but not least, also, I hope that you would have some words of wisdom for our incoming chair.
Words of wisdom for the incoming chair. Be efficient. No, Mr. Peterson, you have more experience in running meetings than many of us do. And so I think you will handle it just well. And I like that Mr. Peterson, he asked the tough questions. And I think that's what this committee should do, is ask the tough questions of those who put the numbers before us. And so I have no problem at all in handing over this gavel to my friend Canova Peterson. I know he'll take this committee, but also this authority to the next level. Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, as we've said, I am confused. I think Ms. Page already is a member of this committee. That was done at our last CVTA meeting.
Was she?
Yes.
I stand corrected.
That's okay. That's
I
all.
stand corrected.
Yeah, at this moment, I'm gonna get that.
We don't want to disenfranchise anyone here.
I stand corrected. You're absolutely right. I apologize.
And we got her on the call and everything.
And that's why he's going to be chair.
All this rushing around to get here, and they're like, hey, you're not on the committee.
Yes, you are.
You're on the committee, Ms. Page.
Yes.
And you'll pay.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. Mr. Peterson has been lauded for his willingness to take on this role. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And the aye, Ms. Page, you can vote. And the ayes have it. Mr. Peterson, you're the new chair of the committee.
If you would continue, Mr. Chair, for the rest of this item, then I will take it.
It sounds good to me. Are there any nominations for vice chair of the finance committee?
I would like to nominate who is on this committee, Patricia Page.
And I would like to second that.
So there's a motion to nominate Ms. Patricia Page, supervisor from New Kent County. It has been seconded as well. Any comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, if you say I asked the hard questions, I think Ms. Page has been pretty strong over the time I've known her to represent New Kent. I'm looking forward to working with her.
Mr. Carroll, as a vice chair, do you want to have anything to say to?
Well, I think that Patricia brings a very strong voice with her, not just to the CVTA, but she'll bring it to here. A good voice of common sense, quite frankly, refreshing sometimes in society these days. A lot of respect for her, and I think she's a great choice, quite frankly, to not only be on the CVTA representing New Kent, but also being our vice chair.
I concur with those comments and said Ms. Page is not just a fighter for New Kent, but also a fighter for the Richmond region as well. And that's what this authority is all about, making sure the Richmond region is the strongest in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and she will ensure that in her vice chairwomanship. So all in favor, Ms. Page?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Congratulations, Ms. Page, you're the vice chair of the CVTA Finance Committee.
Thank you so much. I will gratefully and humbly serve to the best of my ability.
And Ms. Page, I'm getting ready to leave, so you're in charge.
All right,
Just kidding.
we're gonna make a quick transition.
Stay right there and
Just hand over the.
there's no reason to shift that around.
There you go.
Thank you, sir. With that, before we go any further, though, I do want to sit here and.
Camera doesn't know what to do.
There we go, it's working, but I do want to take a moment, though, and Mayor Stoney, you've left me some big shoes to fill on this job. You've done this now for 2 years, and I think that the successes that the CVTA has shown come largely from the work that has been done on this committee that you've led. So I really want to appreciate that, and I think everybody needs to know that this committee has worked very collaboratively, as our outgoing chairman of the CVTA has said, and that you've been a big part of that. And I appreciate what you've done, and I think we all appreciate what you've done.
Thank you, sir.
Forward.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to go to the Finance Committee Chairman's report, which I don't have one, because I wasn't sure at this point. So we will skip that for this month, and then go on to item number 6, which is the CVTA activities report. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First item 6A, the financial activities and investment reports are on page 6 of your agenda packet. This is a summary of tax collections and allocations as of June 30th, 2022, with the year-to-date transfers of a little over 85 million. And it does show local distributions year-to-date for each of the 9 jurisdictions in the region, as well as our operating fund with an end balance of $459,000, and our regional fund with an ending balance of 107, almost $108 million. And I think that it is worth noting that the regional fund is now committed. Some of that funding for the regional projects that were acted on by the full authority over the past few months. So as we work into agreements and standard project agreements and individual segments of particular projects moving forward, that regional fund will fluctuate and
So I didn't get that in my packet.
It's in the packet.
Is it full? Page 6. I go from 5 to 12. That would be missing.
So we will, I think that's a quick summary. I know that we do have a presentation under the next item on investments and a follow-up from my brief report last month. If there are any other questions on the investment report, certainly.
Are there any questions for Mr. Parsons? Seeing none, let's go to the next item. I believe this next item here is the TAC activities report. Mr. Ronald Clark, you've got the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The Cvta TAC held a meeting this past Monday, August the 8th. The first item was dealing with the required documentation. There has been a majority of the localities that have submitted the required quarterly reports and annual certifications for FY22. All 9 of our localities have submitted the FY23 spending plans. Member governments have through the end of September to get in the annual certifications. VDOT provided an update on the Smart Scale Round 5. The application period closed on August the 1st. They reported on the Richmond district having 90 final applications submitted. Validation is currently underway. This is important as the Cvta TAC works on the regional project selection and allocation for the next round of regional funding. Again, this is going to show where our Cvta funds going to be used to leverage the Smart Scale application if they're successful at the end of the Smart Scale grading and review, which won't be until next year. And Chet, what did we say? Was it October of next year?
I think there's still discussion. At the earliest, it would be July.
Oh yeah, it was July. Sorry, that was the application.
Because we know CTBX in the middle of the summer on Smart Scale orders.
So that's when we will know those that put Cvta dollars on the Smart Scale application will know whether or not those funds will be utilized in the Smart Scale process. So I think that's very important for this group. TAC is now in the process of reviewing the project selection and allocation framework for our regional prioritization, as it was recommended to be done annually. This review includes looking at the funding cycle, schedule, project categories and eligibility, as well as project screening, scoring, and ranking. TAC is looking for guidance from the Finance Committee on how to determine whether the application process will start in FY27 or FY29, taking I-64 into consideration. Finally, TAC discussed the Fall Line Trail. VDOT is moving forward with the northern section design build, and it is on schedule for advertisement by the end of calendar year 2022, which is December. The SPA agreement was presented to the CTB, again anticipated for a September approval. The southern section that VDOT is working on is scheduled for advertisement by mid-2023. VDOT did indicate that they have a near final spending plan for the segments of the Fall Line Trail that VDOT will administer. Henrico and Richmond are set to meet with VDOT to compare their segments with VDOT's and plan to have a draft spending plan to the TAC by its September meeting. If approved for recommendation, this could be ready for the Finance Committee either in September or October, the spending plan for the Fall Line Trail. That concludes my report. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am, I got a couple of questions. One, you're looking for guidance from this committee on the 27th, 29th. Could you get into a little more detail of what you're asking?
Yes, sir. So currently, right now, our regional projects that we've selected go through FY26, fiscal year 2026. If we were to do a new application submittal for the localities, We know that we did do the I-64 commitment letter of $100 million. That would be 2 years if we remain on pay-go. That would be 2 years of CVTA funding cycles that would be committed to 64, unless there was some other format, whether bonding or something else, that would allow for other projects to begin in 27. Otherwise, we would be out to the 29 year of applications being submitted for.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr. Carroll.
Well, I think one of the things that can affect that decision is gonna be what happens with what projects may or may not get funded through Smart Scale. And knowing that we won't know what those projects are until probably July of next year, it will probably require us to start a reapplication process after the Smart Scale process is concluded. And at that time, when we do that, then we can take a look again at, what projects will cycle off because they've been funded, how that affects our finances moving forward, what monies we have available. And then the Finance Committee will have to look at working with our financial advisor, where we want to go from there, which could be either staying in a pay-go mode or issuing some type of bonds, depending on what the finances look like. And certainly we may have, depending on how Smart Scale fleshes out, we may have more funds available in our reserve than we currently set aside in our reserve for pay-go, which I think was 10 million. So it's really gonna happen next July when we see what the results are of Smart Scale before we can make a decision on that. So I think we've got some time.
And thank you. I mean, you did exactly what that report was to do because we've talked about it and whether or not we would start it in October of 23. So it helps us. That was still very helpful in providing that to TAC, because then we can work, we can now, know our work plan and getting some of the parking lot items for the actual document reviewed and put before you and prepared for that application process to start the latter of 2023. So thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
What I would say is that we just need to move forward with something, a report similar to that on our agenda for the full committee, so they'll know what's coming in the future.
And if I'm correct, anything that has been applied for where we are leveraging CVTA funds for the Smart Scale applications, should those Smart Scale applications be approved, then our commitment is there. If not, then those funds come back to be recommitted in other ways. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Could we make sure we have that clear when we bring it to the full
Yes, sir,
committee?
I will.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Parsons.
One additional, process clarification. TAC had not come to any decision, but I think that the feedback that this committee is providing today is really helpful. And we plan to continue that discussion next month at the TAC, and we'll bring that report to the Finance Committee, and that will lead right into our September full authority meeting where we could potentially have an action to consider at that point.
Very good, and I agree with Mr. Carroll. I don't think there's anything we can do till we see what happens with Smart Scale as far as the larger jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, before you leave, I need to, and I see we've got other members of TAC here with us today too, so I think it's important that we recognize, you're sitting here speaking for everybody all the time. All the good things we've done here in the CVTA couldn't be done without TAC, our technical advisory committee. None of us have the expertise, and with what you bring to the table is probably a bigger part of the success than what we bring to the table. And I do need to thank all of you that work with on the advisory committee for the good work you do.
Thank you, sir.
With that, let's go back to Mr. Parsons, quarterly report.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I did hand out a larger format set of tables
I have that
because I understood what was in the agenda.
It's either
and
that
I
or
had
reading
problems
less.
reading it. But this is essentially a summary of, summary of the first page here is our fourth quarter expenditures that are reported by each member jurisdiction. So this is actually it's fourth quarter, but it's end of year for FY22. And it shows how spending occurred over each of the 4 quarters of last fiscal year on the projects that were identified by each jurisdiction. So you can go through and you see Chesterfield, Hanover, Enrico through the list. And it's a one-page summary which shows it is summarized at the bottom. So this is a good understanding of what was actually spent by each jurisdiction. And this is what we are asking for. We did this once already, but this is what is certified through administrators or board chairs or the preferred local mechanism. And we are asking for those to be put on agendas, and our TAC members have started to work through that process. We have received some signed certifications on these expenditures, but we understand it takes time to get those in front of the proper signatories. So this is essentially just a summary of what was actually spent.
This is all the local funds.
This is local funds.
Strictly
Yes, sir.
local funds.
That's right. It does show, if you look at from the right side, just before Q1, you also see the expenditures from fiscal year 21. So this is a summary of our last 2 years for each jurisdiction. And you can see that obviously the first year was a little light, and as the local funds have started to accumulate, they're being used for lots of different purposes. And I think this is a great illustration of how impactful Cvta local funds have been to leverage additional grant opportunities and work with smart scale applications and a variety of different things, staffing of transportation positions at the local level.
Any questions on the quarterly expenditures report?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Carroll?
I don't see all of the jurisdictions that are part of the CVT represented on here. And those that are not here, do they not spend any of their funds?
That is correct. They were not reported, and those that I have checked back with, we did follow up with each jurisdiction, and those funds have not been expended.
Okay, but all jurisdictions have reported they have not spent any funds.
Yes, and we should, now that the question was raised, we should note just a 0 in the line so that this table reflects all 9.
I mean, I do think that if they have projects that they have submitted for, that they said they were going to do the local project, when we do this report, we should report on all the projects showing what their status is, whether they've spent dollars on it or not.
Yes, sir. We'll do a year-end report that takes off the quarterly expenditures heading, and that'll accompany the certification pages, and we'll make sure that everybody's reflected there. I did want to note, I forgot to mention, the second page, if you flip over, is the quarterly expenditures for Grpc. So they have also been reporting, it's just a different format, and we'll make sure that that's all packaged in that year-end report.
Do we need to bring this with a recommendation to the full board at our next full board meeting?
I will look back at last year's action on the FY21 expenditures, and if we do need to have that, I'll make sure to include that in the agenda.
Well, we need to make that decision today to recommend it if it's required. We should make the decision now. Are we in agreement with this and want to recommend it to the full board if required? Can I second that? Anybody agree?
Yeah.
Could I have a motion to that effect?
I move to recommend to the full board.
Second.
Okay. You still with us, Ms. Page? Yep, oh, she is. Okay, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it, so it's recommended to the full board. Mr. Parsons, back to you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. The last item on 6C is the remainder of the large format printing. This is the predictive, what we call the local allocation plan. This is what is expected to be spent by each jurisdiction for this existing fiscal year. So this is what we use to track expenditures to build into the quarterly reporting and the annual certification for this year. So We do have all 9 jurisdictions here showing each of their expected expenditures for the various different projects that are identified. And it shows the estimated total cost of each project, the proposed CVTA funds, any other committed funds, whether they're leveraging RSTP or CMAQ or Smart Scale or other types of things. And then any notes that have been provided by the local jurisdiction, and then any remaining funds needed to complete that project. And this is what we use as our baseline, and the TAC will work with this table throughout the year to update and build our quarterly reporting. And this is essentially the front end for FY23, and we'll update this as it goes on. So there is no action necessary for this for the full authority.
Any questions from Mr. Parsons on the local allocation plan?
Sure.
Carol?
I do think this is a really good report, a very necessary report, I think, and this would be posted on our.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because it's important that, you know, the communities see, if they've watched any of our meetings, that we now have these regional funds that are going, of the 50% that's going back to the localities. But many people don't actually know, you know, for example, what is the progress on that particular construction project. And so at least knowing to be able to go back and say, well, we know that there's money dedicated for this, and they're in the process, and so the locality can turn around, like Chesterfield can turn around and say, yep, we have the funds sitting there, and we're in the RFP process right now, or the bidding process. I mean, at least the community can actually look at it and say, well, we know this fund's there, and we know it's coming, it's just a matter of time. So I appreciate the report.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Parsons. With that, I think it's time for more business. Ms. Von Honor, would you please come forward and give us our update on the investment portfolio?
Absolutely.
Do you want to come sit right next to the chair so you can? Okay.
He's gonna be the one asking you this question.
She's the one
It's
that's gonna
easier
be
to
on
talk
camera.
across.
All right.
Camera knows where to go.
Trying to make it easy on the camera.
Yeah, that's, I'm not looking at that. Like, it's better to be over on the hot seat. Good morning, all.
Good
I am
morning.
coming to you today with a more colorful pie chart than in the past. We have received information that has helped us with cash flow projections and have taken $50 million to invest outward. That would be regional funds, that's all that's in here. And that would be, as I understand, all fall lines. So we have 50 million still sitting in the liquid pool so that we can grab that as needed. And then we have the other 50 million out 6, 9, and 12 months. And the different types of investments are there in front
Do you have that in the overhead project, or do you have a handout for that?
of you. Your June report, I thought you all had a copy of it.
Let's see.
I don't believe we have it.
Oh, okay, thought it had been sent for the June one. So if we can slide this around at least to share it with the chair. I apologize.
Tell you what, let's hold your report while we make copies of these to distribute, and we need to send a copy of this to Ms. Page. Okay. Also, does Ms. Page have the ability to join us in closed session? Has that been sent to her?
Yes, sir.
Okay, in that case, let's come back, let's defer item 7 and let's go on to new business here, and item number 8, which I believe this goes to Ms. Eager.
Sure. I believe you have a copy of the draft Memorandum of Understanding between Cvta and Richmond Regional Planning District Commission. Mr. Gregory and I have worked on this, and it was presented to the Plan RVA Executive Committee in July. It is certainly in draft form at this point in time, so I think this is here before you this morning for feedback. We'd like to be able to get your sense of kind of how we envision moving forward. It's structured a little bit differently than the previous MOUs that we've had the last 2 fiscal years, namely to be able to accommodate for the shift in the staffing that has been shaped by the last year's discussions. So we have, hopefully you can see on page 2, the beginning of the scope of services. We've described there, hopefully in enough detail to give useful information, but also with enough flexibility to allow the CVTA to evolve as it moves forward. Essentially 3 buckets of support. So that first, section 1, executive director and dedicated staff support. That's really geared toward the arrangement that we've been discussing the last several months for Plan RVA to be the host, if you will, for employment of the CVTA executive director in a permanent capacity, as well as any other support staff that may be identified and hired. Plan RVA would retain the responsibility for payroll and benefits administration. The employees would be subject to Plan RVA's personnel policies and purchasing and travel and all of those kinds of policies. But the responsibility for supervision, evaluation of performance, salary decisions, anything related to performance in any way, shape, or form would be assigned through this MOU to the leadership of the CVTA to establish that structure on your side, so to speak, of the memorandum. Section 2 describes something a little bit more similar to what we have been providing in the past, in the last 2 fiscal years, providing that continued administrative and technical support services. So this mimics very closely the existing MOU that we have, providing staff support from our technical members, Ms. Firestone and others, to be able to help provide the logistical and administrative and technical support to the CVTA. That's all been historically coordinated through Mr. Parsons, pulling different staff members in for their expertise as needed. And as you know, you see the people that are here in the meetings providing some of that support. And then finally, the third is the facilities, equipment, furnishings, and supplies. As many of you are aware, we are moving into the new office space. We have accommodated for CVTA assigned personnel, I'll call them, in that new space. And so we've built into the budget just the mechanism by which we would provide those services. So again, the spirit of this is to be able to leverage the back office and the infrastructure that Plan RVA has to offer while maintaining kind of the accountability and the autonomy of the day-to-day functioning of the CVTA. I am happy to kind of speak to any one of these sections in a little bit more detail, but that's sort of the overall structure that we took in approaching this. The thought is that the agreement could be a multi-year agreement, but that each year the CVTA would be able to establish a work plan where we could finalize the details of staff utilization, what those needs might be in the coming year to get in that work plan, and then certainly any facilities and equipment costs and that kind of thing. The agreement also does assume that Plan RVA would continue to provide the operating cash flow for the CVTA. So as you know, currently we expend dollars on the CVTA's behalf each quarter and then submit to Chesterfield County as the fiscal agent for that reimbursement. I think that that's worked well, if I may speak for the staff at City of Richmond and for Chesterfield, so that they're not having to deal with the management of individual processing of invoices and that kind of thing. So we do that on our end, and then we batch those and then submit for reimbursement. So that does include, and so in the remuneration section of the proposed agreement, it does speak to how that cash flow operating would be managed. And so we would continue to submit salaries, benefits, and tax payments, other related expenses of our personnel that are typically assigned to various things on the Plan RVA side. When they work for the CVTA and charge, we would bill through that 10% administration fee, as we have been doing. We would continue to incur those operating costs via authority and submit for reimbursement with that 10% administration fee, the office space leasing costs. So there are those budget line items that the CVTA approves as part of their budget and expenditures. And so we would continue to process those invoices on your behalf and pass them through with that 10% admin fee. I'll take a pause there if there are questions.
Questions, Ms. Heater? Mr. Gray, do you have any comments regarding this?
No, happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. We believe it's in good draft form for your consideration. Happy to make any changes or answer any questions that you may have. As Ms. Heater mentioned, it does not include a hard figure of cost every year, because that, of course, is going to change from year to year possibly. So what you would do is you would approve this if it's a full body would, if you're happy with it. And then the idea would be every year, as Ms. Heater mentioned, a work plan would be presented with the budget, and then that would be approved and become part of the agreement from year to year.
Mr. Carroll.
When does the current agreement expire?
The current agreement is still in existence and ongoing until it's superseded or terminated. So you're in good shape as far as the existing agreement. This agreement would supersede the existing agreement.
So we didn't put a timeline on the previous?
It goes until terminated by either party. So there's no hard end date.
All right, the date on this is July 1st of 2022, which is, has been in the past.
Right.
And probably should be updated.
I think
Has everybody on the committee had an opportunity to review the memorandum of understanding here? Ms. Page, have you had a chance to look at this?
Absolutely, sir.
All right, in that case, if everybody's had a chance to look at it, I think we can act to send this on if we have no concerns with it. But I was a little bit concerned when you did that maybe we had not all seen it. Do we want to recommend this to the full CVTA?
So moved.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second with question.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Now we'll have discussion.
So we're gonna send this out to all the authority members to review before the next meeting so that they have an opportunity to, with an instruction to say that we hope to be able to act on this at the next meeting, but we need to make sure we send it out to them so they can, and ask, I guess, for, if there's any questions or input to have them sent back, right? So we can be ready at the next meeting if we need to.
Well, it should be part of the agenda sent to all members for the next CVTA committee.
Yes,
And-
if I may, just
Please,
speaking to
Ms. Hader.
schedule, it might, with your permission, it might be appropriate to send this out in advance of the normal agenda packet schedule, because the commission will meet on September 14th, if I'm not mistaken. And so it might be nice to be able to collect any feedback or responses from CVTA members so that we could feed that through the executive committee of the commission, so that we can not waste another month or two to be able to.
Okay, well, let's deal with the motion for recommendation
Let's discuss the
first. And then do we want to adjust the motion to include the instruction to send this out early?
Discussion on the motion still.
Still, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, and to that point, we have a finance committee meeting coming up before the next meeting. And so what we could do is push it out, get them to, give them a timetable to get information and input back to us prior to the next finance committee meeting that we could then take into consideration and then move forward at the next finance committee meeting with pushing it out for a full meeting in September for a vote.
Yes, I misspoke. The CVTA Finance Committee meeting is the September 4th date. The Executive Committee for Plan RVA meets the week prior on September 8th. So that would work, I think, actually quite well to invite that input so that both bodies would have a chance to review kind of a final before it goes to the full authority at the end of the month.
So what I'm hearing is that it would be good to send this out in time for everybody to have responses back by the end of August. Is that what I'm hearing? Can we amend the motion to include that? Sure.
Second.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion as revised, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Ms. Heater?
Thank you.
Get your instructions on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, let's go back now to Ms. Longley.
Good morning again. As you can see in front of you, you have a more colorful pie chart this go around. because we have been able to invest further out in our maturities, bringing in $50 million to different instruments out there and keeping 50 million in a liquid pool, the two different liquid pools. That will help us in the future so that if you all need something, as I've said before, it's 10 o'clock today, I can have it in the bank tomorrow or today, otherwise the next business day. So it's very liquid. The maturities are 6, 9, and 12 months out. So that will give us more interest, revenue coming in for the longer maturities out there. And then if you had any questions for me.
Any questions for Ms. Longacre? Am I pronouncing that right?
Longacre,
That's right, okay.
it's a fun one.
With a name like Canova, I can appreciate it.
Touche.
Okay, if there are no questions for Ms. Longacre, thank you for bringing the report, and thank you for your conscientious work with this. Keep it going. So the next item on our agenda, item number 9, administrative support position request. Parsons.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. I'm actually sharing this on the screen for those following along at home. So this is actually a good follow-up to the discussion about the MOU with Plan RVA. What you have on the screen, and actually those in the room have it in front of you as well, is a summary of the way that the organization currently operates. The green box at the top is the proposed CVTA structure in terms of staffing that, if you recall, has been brought forward in a couple different phases by the HR roundtable and various ad hoc committees of the authority. And I'll go into that in more detail in just a second. The bottom of the screen is the current staffing that is provided by Plan RVA staff. Every green star is identifies someone that in the past year has put time into the work of the CVTA, including myself and Ms. Firestone, but also in terms of supporting the TAC, coming up with project prioritization methodologies, performance measures, all of the data that has been behind the work of the authority. So we have, I've identified 6 members of staff that have put in considerable time over the past year, and there may be a few more. I don't even include Ms. Heater here in this group because I was focused on the work of the authority itself. So that kind of lends some support to the importance of the MOU with Plan RVA and getting that staff support that isn't currently employed by the CVTA directly. I'm going to go to next screen. Focusing specifically on the CVTA, I've identified in order of priority, and this is a follow-up to the discussion and the recommendations of the phasing for staff, for CVTA staffing that has been brought forward previously. 1A is obviously hiring the executive director, which is underway and could be achieved this year. 1B, which is the green box underneath, I've labeled 1B because it's I think it's paramount to have support for that person when they are hired, as well as I think it's important to have the support now. As you've noticed this morning, every meeting has its own hiccups and fluctuations in terms of what's required to have the meeting come off properly. And I think that the need for an executive assistant for the executive director is important because of all of the demands that are being put on staff currently. Ms. Firestone is essentially the clerk of not just the CVTA, but the TPO and Plan RVA. And she is focused on making sure that the meetings are recorded, the minutes are properly taken, the voting occurs properly. As you know, we have a very complex voting structure, and staying on top of that is a task in and of itself. I think that the need for an additional staff support person to make sure that I am able to focus on the things that I need to focus on in terms of strategic visioning for the organization, planning for the future activities over the next 6, 9, 12 months, working with both this committee as well as the TAC. I think that it would be a great help for me to be able to let go of some of the day-to-day administrative work that I have been doing for the past 2 years to help focus on those strategic needs that the organization is going to have between now and hiring that executive director, and then setting the table so that person will not have to consider those needs in the future. The remaining 2 things here are what has been identified as future needs, 2 and 3, a CFO for the authority, and then a support planner or engineer. The discussion there was I think twofold. It could be a contract type position to provide on-call support as needed, and then consider a full-time staff person to fulfill those needs. The other item that I did hand out was a draft job description for an executive assistant, and this is really a summary of a lot of the different position descriptions that we've used here internally at Plan RVA. I also consulted with HR TAC, with Kevin Page, and got his input on what they've used as their model in Hampton Roads to fill a similar position. We also used our brand new inclusive recruitment program that was developed for Plan RVA over the last year, and I've pulled some of the key highlights and recommendations out of that report to put into this material. So obviously this is a handout today, so you have not had time to review this, but I wanted to put it in front of you for consideration. There is no dire timeline for this to fill this need, but I wanted to get the wheels moving and have this for consideration as decisions are being made over the next 6 months regarding staffing for the authority and the way that our relationship with Plan RVA and the TPO proceeds. Happy to take any questions, but I think we would certainly be able to put this back on the agenda whenever you'd like to consider it again.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. We have questions for Mr. Parsons.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Carroll?
we have a projected salary range that we would need to look at for compensation benefits that would be part of this position in order to be able to do budget considerations to, what we've previously budgeted for staff, for the Cvta.
We do. I think we have a general range to consider. I think that the considerations are obviously going to be impacted by decisions of the other organizations of Plan RVA as it moves forward this year, to make sure that the salary range is what is necessary for the Cvta.
Right.
As we know in discussions about the executive director, those needs are probably going to be different than what has been outlined for the other 2 organizations. So in talking with HR TAC, I do have a good understanding of what their range is, and that could certainly play into what the authority considers.
Mr. Chair, follow?
Please.
I think it's important to have that type of information included in the proposal so that we can properly make a decision, at least in the future, from a recommendation from the Finance Committee. If we believe that, we need to hire someone, which I think we could. But I think we need to know what the numbers are so that when we push this out, if we push this out to the full authority, then they'll know exactly what it looks like and whether or not we need to amend the budget based on what we put in before. I think there was some cushion and some room in the budget that we passed a couple months ago, but I think it's important to have the numbers.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, Ms. Page, you have any questions?
No, sir, I don't. I fully understand. I agree. As finance, I think that we should indeed have numbers or at least an idea of the range. I know when the position was posted, I believe it was posted with a range and not a actual hard number. So I think that we have time to go back and review that and make that a part of our annual budget.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I have a question. This is back to the chicken and egg analogy.
Sir.
You mentioned that we ought to have this person on board for the new executive director. On the other hand, there's a piece of me that says the new executive director ought to be involved in that hire. Your thoughts?
That's a great question. My initial thought is that this position would not be specific enough to really cause concern between myself as the acting director and a new hire. Obviously, there's going to be personalities involved because this person will work closely with me under the current strategy and the executive director when they're hired. So that would certainly be an impact, and I can understand your question. I think that
I pretty strongly feel right now that we're using Plan RVA staff to fill this position temporarily until this is done. I'm not too sure that we couldn't continue doing that until we have the executive director on board and then let the executive director be part with the full intention that I think this description is good. But I think it would be premature to put it out. It's just me now, not before an executive director is able to have some say in who their right hand is going to be.
Yes, sir.
I hate to put somebody on that they not get along.
I totally understand that concern, and I think that my intent today was to start positioning and having the material lined up so that it could be acted upon quickly if that needs to happen. I don't know where things are with the hiring process, and obviously that's going to impact what happens too.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. What I would like to do is say thank you for putting this together and getting ahead of the game on this. I do think you've been given information from this committee that putting a range into this needs to be included. And if you could bring that back to our next finance committee meeting within that form, and then we'll be prepared to go forward. We can make a decision on whether we're going with the chicken or the egg at that time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Any more questions, Mr. Parsons?
Mr. Chair, I have one thing. And that is, I do believe that once an executive director is hired and begin their duties and responsibilities, in fairness to Ms. Firestone, that has a ton of things in her basket, that it would be my desire that CVTA would look at least an assistant administrative assistant for the executive director. But then by the same token, we have to have a salary range for that as well. So I would agree that the executive director would hire their own assistant administrator. But I think in fairness to the workload with Plan RVA, TPO, and CVTA, that we consider that position, even if it's on a part-time basis.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I agree with that, but I would say once the decision is made on executive director, we could probably advertise this position that same day practically.
Absolutely.
And by the time the executive director came on, we would probably already have applications.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll go to the next item of business, which is under the amended agenda will be a 9B closed session. Ms. Heater, would you please read the motion for closed session for us?
Yes, sir. Is there a motion that the that the Finance Committee convene in closed session pursuant to Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3711, Section A1, for the purpose of discussing personnel matters concerning Plan RVA employees and service to the authority under the Memorandum of Understanding for Administrative and Technical Support Services, which requires discussion and consultation with legal counsel pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A8, during which all recordings of the meeting will cease.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
So move.
Do I have? Second. All right, moved by Mr. Carroll, second. Mayor Starks. Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Page?
So we will,
1 second.
leave
Ms.
this.
Page, I didn't commit, Ms. Page is aye. Vote.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Okay.
Point of clarification from legal counsel. Would this not require a roll call vote for going to closed session, when you come out of closed session?
I don't believe it requires a roll call vote. You can do a roll call vote if you like.
I would do it coming out.
Okay, that's fine.
Certification is where you.
Okay, all right. All right, we're in closed session.
So we'll just switch this
Sorry, but I can't hear anybody.
Start over.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, we'll start over. Do each of you vote to certify that to the best of your knowledge, only public matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed session was convened were heard, discussed, or considered? Ms. Firestone, would you poll the board?
Yes,
Poll the
sir.
Committee.
Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Chair Peterson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Page,
Aye.
Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
We are now back in open session. Next item on our agenda is future meeting topics. A couple of them were included in your agenda today: financial policy review and amendments, regional projects fund allocation. Are there other items anybody would want to consider to add to this list?
Mr. Chair. I think based on our discussion this morning and the TAC report that Ms. Clark provided, we may want to bring back the regional allocation framework if changes are made to the application cycle and the implications from Smart Scale are realized.
Okay, could you better describe what we want to add to the, on this list? And, because that's something we wouldn't be bringing back right away.
No, sir. No, that will be probably a few meetings from now.
I'll let you figure out how to put the, reword this for future.
Yes, sir.
Future meeting topics. Any other meeting topics that anybody would like to have added to our discussion? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item 11, CVTA Finance Committee member comments. I've talked enough. Now, who else wants to talk?
Mr. Chair, one last comment.
Mr. Carroll.
I know you find it hard to believe. I want to thank you as being vice chair of the CVTA Finance Committee for the last 2 years, and I want to thank the mayor for being chair of the Finance Committee for the last 2 years. I think that, I think we've shown in the way that all of us have conducted our business and conducted ourselves that we are truly working towards what we think is the best for our communities in Central Virginia for transportation. And I want to commend you both for all of your leadership on the Finance Committee. And I look forward to the next year of doing this again with y'all, both on the Finance and the full committee.
Looking forward. Any further comments?
Mr. Chair,
Page.
I want to ditto Supervisor Carroll's comments and to add that I absolutely understand how busy our schedules can be. So how busy you all's schedules have been, but to your commitment and dedication for transparency and the ability to be flexible in decision-making. And so I want to thank both of you for your time and commitment, only hoping that that I and future officers will be able to live up to the standards that you all have set. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Anyone further? Okay, next meeting, September 14th, same time, same place, and let's make sure Ms. Page gets the notification. So, and with that, we're adjourned.
Very nice.
Have a good day.
Meeting. Good meeting.